With aching hearts, little Gus's family break their silence.
Yeah, it's a pretty hard time.
The 4-year-old was last seen playing outside his home on the family's vast and isolated sheep station near Yunta in the mid-north on Saturday afternoon.
We are holding on to hope that he will be found and returned safely.
That hope shared by all on the ground in a remote corner of SA. A friend speaking on behalf of the family says they're shocked and devastated.
Gus's absence is felt in all of us, and we miss him more than words can express.
What is the first thing you should do when a child goes missing? Call the police and FBI? Call the police and FBI and shut down the borders and airports? Or find out which paedophiles frequent the area? Or search for the child? Answers at the end of this video.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Addressing the heartbreaking speculation, longtime family friend Fleur Tyver, am I pronouncing that right, from Yunta said there is no way they've harmed this child. The family would not have harmed this child even if the world was about to come to an end, which it really has now for them, Ms. Tyver told the Advertiser. If he just got into a little creek down under a bush and has just hidden there and isn't running around and getting dehydrated, he could be hiding somewhere. The trouble is, if he hid somewhere and sheltered somewhere and then died in some obscure spot, it would make it very difficult to find him. One aspect that has been quite unusual with this case is that the actual caregivers, the people actually in charge of the custody of this child, they are not in front of the cameras. That is pretty unusual, isn't it? According to news.com.au, I think it's unfortunate people are speculating because things like this pain the family, but I do understand that when there are so many unanswered questions, people will naturally try to fill in the gaps, even if their theories are implausible and impractical. Well, the wedge-tail eagle theory, the eagle kidnapping the child is admittedly one of those implausible and impractical theories. It has to be said, though, that a child vanishing into thin air for, 8 or 9 days straight with no trace is even more implausible. I also think the complaints about what are being said online is really, you'd think that the focus would really be on looking for this child and all of that would be water off a duck's back. But when there's so little evidence in a case like this, one area where we can find potential insight is in raw statistics, but this is admittedly an area where angels fear to tread.
Are you sure you want to hear this?
But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Thank you very much to Run the World and also to Wendy for your super thanks contributions. Really appreciate it. If you find this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button and let's get started. According to a peer-reviewed study on missing children published in December 2022 on Science Direct, quote, some children who have been reported missing are not actually missing, but instead are victims of fatal injury by their parents or other caregivers. Caregivers responsible for the death of a child in their care may falsely claim the child is missing or has been abducted. Why? Well, to provide an explanation for the child's disappearance and to divert suspicion away from their role in what truly happened to the child. Is it possible that Gus was accidentally harmed? I'm thinking of the JonBenet Ramsey case and the Madeleine McCann case. What if something happened by accident and someone felt they had to cover it up? Research has demonstrated that victims in false allegation cases are primarily children under the age of 5, with a median age of 3.5 years old. Now, isn't it interesting? We know Madeleine McCann falls into that age category, as does Gus, whereas JonBenet Ramsey, who was 6 years old at the time, is slightly outside of it. Back to that study. Consistent with the Department of Health and Human Services, their findings, children under the age of 4 years are at greatest risk of severe injury or death by their caregivers. Listen to this. Over half of children who are the subject of a false allegation are 5 years old or younger. That's according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, a report from 2020. On the other hand, the average age for children killed as a result of non-familial child abductions is much higher at 11 years old. The disparity observed in victims' ages is partially explained by the primary motivation of offenders. Compared to sexually motivated non-family abductions, most false allegation cases arise from fatal physical injury afflicted by the caregiver, and in many cases the child was unwanted. Additional risk factors identified in false allegation cases are unstable environments, significant interpersonal struggles between family members, and recent changes to household structures. These also contribute to circumstances leading to false allegation. Now, one thing we simply don't know is what the original family structure was in this case, and how and why it changed. In short, where are Gus's parents and what happened to them? Let's go back to this report. Most false allegation cases involve a single offender, and the gender of offenders is nearly evenly split between males and females, with the biological mother of the child being the most frequent. Meanwhile, the common denominator across all types of reported disappearances is that law enforcement must initially rely on information provided by the caregivers. Notably, many offenders directly reported the child as missing or abducted to law enforcement, which allows for further examination of the characteristics of these reports. I think another scenario to revisit besides this particular area are water holes in the area. It's notoriously difficult to search in water, as we saw in the Nicola Bully and Kylie Rodney cases. Human beings tend to overestimate their abilities and capacities to search in water. Back to the article from news.com.au, Ms. Tyver, who said her family has been close to the Lamonts for 130 years after settling on neighboring stations, described Gus's family as kind, gentle, and trustworthy. They embody everything about humans that can be good. If we regard this character evidence as irrefutable, I think we nevertheless have to consider a hybrid scenario, which is one where there isn't deliberate foul play per se. There is not intentional harm to this child, but there's also not simply a scenario where the child wandered off. If this is the case, and we hope it isn't, one would want to look at fresh mounds of earth and the movements of the caregivers during the period immediately prior to the child's reported disappearance. In the Nora Corrin case, and I wrote a book about that, where she disappeared in the Malaysian jungle, it took 10 days for her body to be recovered, and in the end it was recovered not by dogs, not by infrared or ground-penetrating radar scanners, not by a whole army of mobilized Malaysian troops, but in the end she was found by a bunch of amateur hikers who simply smelled something in the area. And that brings us back to the quiz. When a child goes missing, the first thing you should do is search for the child. I'm glad to see so far 2/3 of you answered correctly in this case. In 91% of missing children cases, the case is resolved. The child is simply found. And so, obviously, with a statistic like that, your first thought shouldn't be that there's foul play and that there's some kind of abduction going on. Anyway, I hope some of you have learned something here. If you have, let me know in the comments. I'm not going to take it further than that. I hope you've had a great weekend. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.